Okay, hey everybody. Last talk of the ReactiveConf conference. I'm really excited. How are you doing? How was the conference? Was it good? Yeah, I bet you enjoyed. I heard some really brilliant talks, and it was a lot of fun for me. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about reactive programming, like you've probably heard throughout the conference, and with RxJS, and because I focus on Angular, then we're going to see some examples with Angular because it really it has great features, and it really promotes the use of RxJS in your applications. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm a front-end developer, consultant, and trainer, focusing in Angular in the past few years. A few things that I do in my spare time is I organize the NG Girls organization. I'm the founder of NG Girls. We have workshops which are free for women who are beginners in the programming world, and we, of course, do this with Angular. We also think about more events for more advanced women, and not only women also. We want to increase the diversity in all aspects in the programming world. So we're having workshops all around the world all the time. In some of them I'm present, in some other workshops I'm just helping out remotely, giving the resources. It's all open source, so if you want to organize a workshop like this or some kind of an event with NG Girls, so just come talk to me. I'd love that. Another thing that I do on my spare time is I organize the Angular Nights meetup group in Israel. We're learning Angular and its ecosystem by working, workshops, and so on. Okay, enough about that. Let's dive into Reactive. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit of overview of some things that you can do with RxJS. We can't dive really deeply into this in half an hour, and also the end of the conference, the end of the day, you probably have already a lot on your mind and a lot of drinks that you've been drinking, maybe, right? There are good stuff here. Let's start with the way I like to think about reactive programming, what it makes me think about. Do you remember this? Who is familiar with this thing? Oh my God, oh yeah. So, the Incredible Machine, I used to play it as a little girl, and just a few months ago I realized that this was actually kind of like reactive programming, kind of. And that I was building building systems that have some kind of a chain reaction. But there is a difference here, because in the Incredible Machine, each time there's an operation that's doing something, then it's doing it once, and you have to restart the whole system if you want to do it again, right? Okay, but there is some kind of a chain reaction, also like the domino that we saw before. So maybe a better example is this. Do you know this one? Who's familiar with this movie? Who recognizes this guy? Okay, great. So, yeah, really great movie called Modern Times. We see Charlie Chaplin here, and he's really doing the same operation. He's like an operator who's getting a stream of events, and trying to get a hold of it and do the same operation each time without having anything disturbing on the way. Well, this is a great scene from a great movie, so if you're not familiar, if you are, just watch it again. Like, I enjoy it every time. It goes on, and you know. All right. All right, let's get a little bit serious. So, talking about, we have the links to the YouTubes here if you want, when I publish the presentation. So we're talking about RxJS with Angular. So let's see some use cases and what it means, okay? So RxJS, functional programming, you think about everything about the world as an event stream. So you get events one after another and after another. Sometimes you just get one event and you finish your job. So that's also okay. So HTTP calls are events when the event comes. Usually it's asynchronous events. So we have HTTP calls. So when the response comes, then you can do something with it and change some reactions, maybe even have another HTTP call chained to it. WebSockets. So WebSockets are direct communication with the server. So of course you get streams of events. DOM events. A user does something, clicks, mouse moves, and so on. So these are also things that you can stream into RxJS, into observables. Animations also. There's a great lecture. I think I have a link, or maybe in the next slides. Ben Lesh, who is one of the developers of RxJS, and he's also a speaker that speaks in lots of events all around the world. He recently started talking about animations with RxJS, so that's really cool. And of course, there's more every idea that you have. Some people tell me that they start seeing events and observables like all around them. So I think I also start doing this. Like my dog barks, and her stream of barks is a stream of events, and so on. So you start getting too much into this at one point, but that's okay. In Angular, you've got a lot going on around RxJS and observables. So routing is done with observable, and we'll see that. HTTP, or the new implementation of HTTP, which is HTTP client, also, and the response, the default response is an observable. You can change it to promise if you're more comfortable with that, but there are many advantages for observables, so try using them before you switch back to promises. I'm using serverless a lot with Firebase. So I'm using also the library Angular Fire 2, which is a special library built for Angular and Firebase, which connects the stream of events we have in Firebase real-time database and the status of the user, which is also can also change all the time because the user logs in, logs out, maybe changes the credentials or something. So all these streams, they come with a WebSocket, and they're dealt by Angular Fire 2 as observables. So you can get them and chain your actions to that. Another thing about Angular Fire 2, if you want to query your data, then your queries, the queries themselves that come from the client side, they also implemented them as observables. So if you, for example, want the user to be able to change the number of results that you get from the database, then the number of results will be an event coming into an observable, emitted into an observable. And if you like the Redux pattern for managing your data flow, then in Angular we have NGRX, which is a whole implementation of the Redux pattern as observables, and it takes advantage again of everything that Angular has to give you for observables with RxJS. Okay, so what is observables? We have the observer pattern. It's not something very new. We've had it for a long time. And basically, well, this is my dog. And she observes broadcast, YouTube or television or whatever. So there is a stream, and you subscribe to it. You open this YouTube, you turn on the television, and then this is your subscription to the data, to the stream, and then you do something with it. So what my dog is doing with it is just watching very interestingly, and maybe she's also doing some kind of switch map, which takes this stream and switches it to her dreams later on at night. Maybe. So just an abstraction of what's going on in this picture. We have the subject, which is the source of the event. And you can create your own subjects. The subjects are what you can control to emit events, but sometimes you just let something else emit the events, so this is the subject. Then it is wrapped within an observable, which you can't make it emit anything. Okay, you can't control it, you just subscribe to it, you just listen to the events from there. Okay, and you have the observer, the dog, and the subscription. So only as long as there are subscriptions, then the observable matters. The subject matters, its events are doing something. When you switch off the television, then you don't get the data and you don't pass on the data to the dog. Okay, so this is how you would do this in code. In this case, it's an Angular component. Now, just to tell you ahead of time, this is not exactly the best practice, and the next slide will be the best practice, because Angular has special ways to deal with observables. But this is really the basic. So you have here, can you see the pointer? Okay, so we inject the user service into the component, and then we want to get the username in the template. Okay, so a good practice, one of the best practice, is to really deal with data, deal with initializing the component, the data of the component within the ng-onInit method, ng-onInit method, which is a lifecycle method in Angular components. Okay, so far so good. What we do here, we have a subscription. We have, let's talk about this in a moment. We go to the user service, and we have there the user observable, which we're getting from somewhere else. We're not getting into the service at the moment. And also a good practice is to put a $sign in the names of the observables, so that we will know just when we look at them that these are observables. So user $sign, an observable that we get from somewhere. And when we subscribe to it, we can do something with the event that we're getting. So every time that the user changes or the user data changes, then we can do something. And in this case, we just copy it to the local user that we have on this component. Okay? And then we can display it in our template. Now, this notation with the question mark, it tells the template, the interpolation here, that only if user exists, then go and take its name, the name property that you have on the user. Because if you don't do that and user is null or undefined, then you will get an error. Okay? So this is kind of, I remember this syntax from CoffeeScript. Who here has used CoffeeScript? Yeah, okay, that was, so that was a really good idea there, and I like this notation. Okay, so you can do this with Angular. Okay, now when you subscribe to the user, like I said before, if you don't subscribe, then nothing happens. Then the user can change the, can log in, log out, and so on, but nothing really will happen. No one will listen to this. Only once you have at least one subscription and the observable has saves all its subscriptions and counts them. And so as long as there at least one subscription, then you get the data and do something with it. Okay? But the thing is that the subscription will keep living until you unsubscribe from it. So it takes it takes up your memory. It keeps on working in the background, and if this component is destroyed, then still the subscription works. It still tries to do. Oops. It tries to do this thing to copy the data. So what we want to do is when the component is destroyed, to unsubscribe. So when you subscribe, you get a reference to the subscription. So we save that, and on another hook of Angular, ng-on-destroy, we just call unsubscribe on the subscription. Okay? So if you do have to use subscribe, and you know that it's in a place that is temporary in your application, then always remember to clean up when this place is destroyed. If it's a component, usually it's a component. Okay. So this is a better way, the Angular way, because Angular introduces something that's called the async pipe. And the async pipe is built to deal exactly with this, with observables, with async data. So it manages the subscription. It subscribes whenever it's needed, when the component is created. It unsubscribes automatically for you when the component is destroyed. So again, on init, we're just grabbing a reference to the user observable, and we use it in the template. We pass the async pipe, and then we do the same thing. We see, like it already takes out the data. It doesn't display the observable. It displays the event that you get, the data that you get in the observable. And then it takes out the name out of that. Okay? So this is the better way to do this. So in 99% of cases, this is the way you'll do this. Another example that we have here is for getting the recipe observable. And in this case, the component might get a recipe ID from the parameters or from the user's action or something like that. So you might need it on ng-on-init, or maybe you'll have this line somewhere else in a different method that is reacting to the user's actions. But every time here, you get a new observable, actually, into this recipe. You get a copy, a reference of a different observable. And that's OK, because the async pipe also deals with that. So when it sees that all the observable is not referenced anymore, then it also unsubscribes to it and subscribes to the new one. So this is what we have here. And there's another little trick here. If, for example, we want to get multiple members of the recipe data, then we can wrap the relevant code with ngIf, and then let recipe get the copy of the data, and then we can just go directly to recipe. Okay, so this is recipe data without the observable, and we can just go and grab recipe ID and recipe title and so on, instead of doing recipe observable async.id, recipe observable async.title every time. Okay, so nice little trick, again with Angular. Okay, so we have operators in RxJS, of course. RxJS is mostly operators. There are like more than 60 different operators to manipulate your data. And what we see here is getting, again, well, the recipe with its ID, and doing something, and returning something else, or modify the data that we get with the event. Okay, so HTTP, here I'm using HTTP client service. I'm grabbing the item that I need with the ID that I need, but what it returns back, the result, is an object of data, but I need the ID inside it. Okay? It doesn't give me the ID inside the object, but I have the ID already before because I called it with the ID. Okay? So maybe I want a list of items. I want to preserve the ID within the object that later on I'll maybe display it in the component. So one very, very useful operator is map. And it takes whatever you got from the event, and then you can do stuff with it and return new data. Okay? So in this case, we return a new object that actually copies the result object and adds the ID. More useful, popular operators. So in this example, we have some kind of an observable which represents, wow, you don't see the laser here, that gets numbers, a stream of numbers. And the first operator start with, it just gives you the first value so that you can do something with it. Then, in case you're waiting for like if the first value doesn't come right away. You can filter the results, so it will not continue the stream if it doesn't match the filter. Scan is like reduce in regular synchronous JavaScript. So you can collect the results, the events that you had before, and do something with that. So start with really helps with that, because in reduce we always have the initial value, right? And this is the way to give an initial value to work on in observables. And do is also very, very useful. It doesn't have any side effects. It passes whatever the stream passed to it. So you can't return something else. You just do stuff. So you can debug with it, or you can route with it. We'll see another example in a moment. Now, in favor of tree shaking, you have to import every operator that you use separately, and it just adds it to the operators. Okay. So switch map is also a very powerful operator that you're going to use a lot. And in this example, we again listen to the user observable. In this case, we're connected to Firebase, and we're using to the authentication state through Firebase. And we want to get the user data from the database, because we have additional data like favorite color or other things. So once we get the value of the user, we do a switch map, which always takes the last value of the user and does something with that, and returns a new observable, not a value, but an observable. And so here we're returning the reference, the value that we get from the database where we access the user details. Now we got the ID from the user, and well, this is just the syntax of Angular Fire 5 for grabbing Angular Fire 2 version 5, sorry, for grabbing the data from the real-time database. And you can check whether the user exists, because if the user is logged out, then it will return null, and then we can return an observable of null in the end, okay? So we don't have any user data. But that also stresses the fact that switch map returns an observable, and this observable is then also gives you the events, the data that you need. Okay, I've got a lot of more examples here and not so much time. So let's try to go quickly over what I've got here. Routing parameters. When you route with the Angular router, then the parameters are a stream of observables. Oops. Okay, so the parameters, and for each parameter, so that's also a method, an operator of observables. You do something, for example, you grab the data that you need from the component. More in routing, so a lot about the routing. The activated route, this is just one example of something you have in the router that works with observables. Okay, so the URL segments, the parameters like we saw, so the query parameters that can change, and so on. So check out how to the router, how to use this, what kind of data you're getting with these observables. The guards, the route guards, are also, well, you can pass Boolean to the guard to say whether the routing is allowed or not. You can pass a promise, and you can also pass an observable. And in this example, we just check if the user is authorized to get into this route. For example, if the user is an admin. So every time we try this, the router guard will check once if this user is authorized. It will perform the can activate method once every time the user tries to route there. So we just need the first result, take one. And then we map it because we want to take from the user only the user is admin. And if it's true, then let them go to this route. And if not, then you can navigate. And here we're using the do operator. Then the do operator just navigates to another route. Okay, these are more route guards that you can use, which also take observables. Can activate child, can deactivate a route, resolve the data that you need for this route, can load, and just check it out, really powerful stuff. I have here an example of event that I got from another library that isn't Angular. It's actually something with Backbone that I use within an Angular application. So whenever I get event there, for some type of event, I want to open a dialog for the user, and the dialog is displayed with material, with Angular material. So, so I don't show the callback for this event that comes from this library, but this is, well, this is the callback. I don't show the use of the callback, but the callback is create dialog, and then you can pass in the data that you need. And this is a service. This is not in the component. This is a service that gets these events, and this is just the way that we create an observable from this data, from these events, and then we can emit with next. We emit the data that we want. And then in the main component, for example, the component that's responsible for opening the dialogues, then we can use this, subscribe to this dialog. Oops, we subscribe to the dialog, and whenever we get this event, we open the dialog. So this is an example of using subscription inside the component. So don't forget undestroy to unsubscribe. Creating observables, so there are a lot of methods, like you can create a rock observable, but you can create also observables based on data and streams that you already have. So for example, from events, oh, I tried too much. Where am I? Okay, from DOM events, from promises, timer and interval events, and from arrays, whether whether you get an array and want to spread it, or you get values that are like an array that's already spreaded. This is an example of mouse move, where you can create observables from the mouse down, like it's a drag and drop example. So you create the observable from the event mouse down, and another one from mouse move, and one from mouse up, but nothing happens until you subscribe to them. And then you can use a merge map and take until to modify, to take one stream and then switch it once you get an event, switch to the other stream. So it subscribes to the other stream. And then take until also actually unsubscribes to the stream when something happens. Okay, so take until mouse up. So when you get an event of mouse up, then you stop listening to mouse move. You unsubscribe to this actually. Okay, really, really quickly, I'm way over my time, right? You have completing of observables, which you can use, and then you don't need to unsubscribe, and so that's really, really great. So use them when you know that you can stop the stream of events. And more in observables, well, listen, there's a lot more to know and to think about observables, but just whenever you have some kind of use case that you say, okay, these are asynchronous events, and how do I deal with that? Then there are a lot of answers for that, okay? So a lot of things that you can read more, learn more about them. Not gonna get into this right now. I've got here a list of great resources that you can use. I just want to quickly show two of the resources. There's RxFiddle, which is really small. Wait a minute. Okay, so you can, here this is their demo. You can try out different operators of RxJS, and you can try combining and creating observables and see the result here. Okay, and you can tested. Okay. You can just try it out. It's really great. And Rx Marbles, which has all the, well, I think all the operators here, and you can actually change these marbles. These are actually the events in the stream, and see what this operator is doing and what will be the result. Okay. Tomorrow, if you have, if there's still a room in this workshop, I'm having a workshop with Dominic Elm. We're doing it as part of the Thoughtram training, and we'll be teaching you RxJS and NGRX for the whole day. There's a lot to learn, but once you get a grasp of it, it's really cool. After tomorrow, I'm doing a little meetup, not very little actually, where I'm talking about Angular with Firebase, which, like we saw, also works with observables and really fun to work with. So you can join the meetup also. This will be hands-on meetup. And that's it. That was me. Sorry that I took a bit more of your time. But you can ask me questions and contact me through these channels. So I hope you're going to start using observables, RxJS. If you haven't done so yet, RxJS works not only with Angular, it works with a lot of stuff in JavaScript, with everything actually, vanilla even. So I hope you're going to start using it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.